I heard the words so softly at first that I thought my ears were playing tricks on me. The evening light was falling through the kitchen blinds, slicing the room into pale gold and shadow. And there I stood, holding a grocery bag full of fresh apples, while my granddaughter Lily whispered, "Grandma, Mom says you shouldn't stay here anymore." My fingers tightened around the paper bag until it crinkled. I remember thinking how strange it was that the hum of the refrigerator suddenly sounded louder than her voice. Have you ever felt a moment split your life into before and after? I'm 68 now, and I've lived long enough to know that heartbreak rarely arrives with fireworks. Most times, it shows up as a sentence spoken too casually, in a place that used to feel like home. I had paid the mortgage on that house for 7 years, ever since my daughter Elaine lost her job and her husband, Mark, decided that marriage was optional, but his new fishing boat wasn't. I wrote checks every month, kept every receipt in a lavender folder tucked in my dresser, and told myself I was doing what mothers do, hold the walls up when the wind gets too strong. But you see, after my husband Walter passed, gone too soon from a heart that worked for everyone but himself, I found companionship in responsibility. Bills, statements, loan documents. They were predictable. They didn't shout, they didn't leave. I kept every page, every signed agreement Walter and I ever made, even the old warranty papers for the dishwasher we replaced 20 years ago. Maybe that's why I noticed when things stopped feeling right in Elaine's home. Little changes at first, a coldness in her voice, a hesitation when I entered the room, a locked cabinet where we'd once kept the family photo albums. I told myself it was stress. People under pressure say things they don't mean. I said that to myself every night while sorting the mail on the kitchen counter. Electric bills, a water statement, an insurance notice, all addressed to a house I didn't technically own, even though my name covered more of its payments than either of theirs. Still, I cooked dinner most nights. I folded laundry, even Mark's, though the smell of gasoline and lake water clung to his shirts like a warning. I drove Lily to school when her parents were too busy. I smiled. I swallowed my pride like it was a vitamin I needed to stay alive, and I kept paying. The day things shifted more sharply was a Tuesday. I remember because I had an appointment at the bank earlier, a routine matter, and the teller, a young man named Christopher with kind eyes, reminded me, "Mrs. Donnelly, you still have automatic transfers going to the Prescott Avenue mortgage. Do you need any assistance adjusting those?" I laughed it off, said everything was fine, but something tightened in my chest. On the drive home, I kept replaying his words. "Do you need any assistance?" It felt like the universe asking me if I was awake. That night, I overheard Elaine and Mark talking in the dining room. My hearing isn't what it once was, but when people are careless, truth has a way of slipping through. He said the house was theirs now, that Mom helped, but that doesn't mean she gets to stay forever. And Elaine didn't argue. She didn't defend me. She didn't even lower her voice. Have you ever realized too late that you were being used? I cried quietly in my room that night, more from disappointment than pain. But even through the tears, I pulled out my lavender folder. I laid every document on the bed: bank transfers, canceled checks, the written promise Elaine had made on the afternoon we signed the refinancing papers, her handwriting round and neat, stating that my contributions gave me lifetime residency unless I chose otherwise. I remember her saying, "Mom, this just makes it official. You'll always have a home with us." Funny how promises fade for the people who make them, but echo forever in the hearts of the ones who believed. The next morning, I placed all those papers neatly back into the folder. I didn't say anything yet. I simply brewed my coffee, the same way I'd done every morning since moving in, letting the rich, familiar smell steady me. And when I stepped into the kitchen and saw the way Elaine glanced at me, nervous, almost avoidant, I knew something essential had shifted. I wasn't just unwelcome, I was an inconvenience. A burden they wanted to set outside like an old piece of furniture left at the curb with a cardboard sign, free to whoever wants it. But I'm not disposable. I may be soft-spoken, but I'm not weak. And the truth is, quiet people often carry the sharpest clarity. That morning, as the sunlight warmed my hands wrapped around my coffee mug, a calmness settled over me. Not anger. No, I've learned that anger burns fast and leaves ashes. This was something steadier, heavier, like a stone placed gently in the palm. I knew I would not let their betrayal break me. I would not raise my voice or throw accusations. I would not beg to stay where love no longer lived. I would use the one power I still had, truth written in ink, signed with their own names. The strange thing is, the night I decided I wouldn't let them break me, I slept better than I had in months. I woke up before the alarm, before the sun, lying there in the quiet dark, listening to the house breathing. Pipes, the fridge, the faint hum of the street outside. It used to comfort me, that sound. That morning, it felt more like I was listening to something that no longer belonged to Mickey. My mind drifted back, as it often does, to a different house and a different kind of silence. Walter's and mine. He used to snore so gently, it sounded like a soft motorboat in the distance. The night he didn't snore at all was the night everything changed. Heart attack, they said. Quick, they said. I stood in the kitchen in my bathrobe while the paramedics rolled him out, my eyes glued to the refrigerator door covered in magnets and unpaid bills. Grief has a way of making you see every number printed on paper. Funeral home invoices, hospital statements, the life insurance payout with Walter's name at the top. I remember sitting at our little dining table weeks later, glasses slipping down my nose, calculator beside my teacup, deciding how to stretch my widow's benefits and that insurance money for as long as the good Lord allowed me to be here. I kept the house for a while. Then the roof started leaking. The furnace died. The neighborhood changed. The feeling of safety left one slow day at a time. Elaine had come to me back then with tears in her eyes and a stack of overdue notices in her hand. Their house on Prescott Avenue was on the edge, she said. They had missed too many payments. Mark's job wasn't steady. They'd lose everything without help. She said it like losing that house would be the end of the world, as if she'd forgotten I once started over in a one-bedroom apartment with a second-hand couch and Walter's old toolbox. Still, she was my girl. I saw that panic in her eyes, and I felt my heart slide toward her like it always did. Mothers do that. We lean toward our children's trouble like plants searching for sunlight. We went to the bank together. I can still smell the air in there, cold, a little like toner and someone's too strong cologne. The loan officer, a woman named Carla with red nails and a tired smile, slid the refinance documents across the desk. So, Mrs. Donnelly, you'll be contributing this amount monthly, and in return, there's the addendum about residency, she said, tapping the page with the back of her pen. Elaine squeezed my hand. This way, you never have to worry about going into some home, Mom. You'll be with us. We're a team. Carla had turned the paper so I could read the typed paragraph. A simple statement, really. It recorded that I would be paying a specific portion of the mortgage every month and, in exchange, had the right to live there as long as I wished, as long as I obeyed household rules and did not engage in illegal activities. I laughed at that part. Me, some kind of outlaw. I took my time reading it. I checked the dates. I watched Carla notarize the signatures. The stamp made a heavy thunk on the paper, and something in me relaxed. Walter had taught me that. If you love people, you still put things in writing. Not because you don't trust them, but because you never know who they'll be under stress. Have you ever trusted a smile more than a signature, only to learn later you should have done the opposite? Moving in had almost felt joyful back then. We carried my boxes in one by one. Elaine posted a picture on social media, me holding a casserole dish in their kitchen, captioned, "3 generations under one roof. So blessed." Friends commented heart emojis and wrote how lucky she was to have help with Lily. I didn't mind the word help. It sounded better than burden. At first, it really was nice. I took Lily to the park after school. I made Sunday pot roast and watched old movies at night. When my Social Security check came, I transferred my share of the mortgage, like clockwork. I set up an automatic payment from my account to theirs and kept every bank confirmation email printed and hole-punched in that lavender folder. Receipts from the grocery store tucked in behind, notes in my handwriting on the back. Paid electric bill for March, covered property tax shortage. Little by little, though, it stopped feeling like sharing and started feeling like paying rent in a place where my name wasn't on the mailbox. They stopped asking if I wanted to watch something and just changed the channel. They'd invite friends over and say, "Don't mind Mom, she just keeps to herself," like I was an old coat hanging on a hallway hook. When Mark bought that boat and posted pictures of it online, I stared at the shiny white hull and thought of the extra mortgage payments I'd made the year before when he was unemployed. The worst wasn't the money. It was the way my presence shifted from welcome to tolerated. Mark began to complain if I used the washer too much or took too long in the shower. Elaine started locking her office and flinching if I walked in while she was on the phone. Once I heard her tell someone, "Well, it's our house, and she should be grateful." My cheeks burned even though no one could see me. Did you ever realize too late that you had slowly trained people to believe your sacrifices were just the bare minimum? That morning after Lily's whisper, I watched them both move through the kitchen in a strange kind of dance. Elaine scrolling on her phone, Mark slamming cabinet doors louder than necessary. I asked Elaine gently, "Is there something we should talk about?" She didn't look up at me, just at the screen. "Mom, it's just, things are tight," she said. "We need space. We're thinking maybe it's time you consider other arrangements. A smaller place, or maybe assisted living. They have nice places now." Assisted living. Like I was a car being moved to long-term parking. I felt my heart stutter, but my voice came out soft and steady. "We have an agreement, Elaine, about this house." She rolled her eyes, that little gesture that used to mean nothing when she was 15 and moody, but now cut deeper. "Mom, that was just so the bank would approve things. It's not like a real thing. You know we love you." Right then, something inside me clicked into place. Not anger. Not yet. Just certainty. I thought of Carla's red nails pressing that notary stamp. I thought of the attorney Walter and I had used to write our wills, a patient man named Mr. Green, whose card was still in my wallet. I thought about every transfer confirmation sitting in my lavender folder, every grocery store receipt, every utility bill I'd quietly paid when they were too busy to notice the shut-off notices in the mail. Love may be messy, but ink on paper is not. They could pretend that the agreement was nothing. The law would not. I smiled then, a small, calm smile that seemed to unsettle Elaine more than any shouting would have. "I understand," I said. "Thank you for being honest with me." She seemed relieved, mistaking my quiet for surrender. But as I rinsed my coffee cup and set it gently in the dish rack, I was already planning my afternoon. I would go to the bank, I would print my account history. I would make copies of every document in that lavender folder at the little copy shop on Maple Street, where the machines still smell like warm paper. And then I would call Mr. Green's office. If they wanted to pretend this was their house, I was finally ready to remind them what those signatures had really meant. I left the house that afternoon with the lavender folder tucked neatly inside my tote bag, the way some women carry a Bible or good luck charm. The November air had that thin, crisp bite to it, the kind that makes your breath visible, like the world is letting you see the things you usually keep inside. As I closed the front door behind me, I paused for a moment on the porch. Through the living room window, I could see Mark flipping through channels and Elaine pacing with her phone pressed to her ear. Neither of them noticed I was gone. It's a strange feeling, stepping out of a house you've kept afloat for years, knowing the people inside believe you're powerless without them. Almost funny, in a painful sort of way. I started walking toward the bus stop, hands wrapped around the straps of my tote. My mind drifted back, again, to all the quiet accommodations I'd made without complaint. Paying extra insurance premiums when they missed deadlines. Covering the repair bill when the dishwasher broke because Mark said the warranty must have expired. My name wasn't on that house, no, but my fingerprints were everywhere. When I arrived at the bank, the lobby was practically empty. A young woman at the counter smiled, the tired but polite smile of someone who has used too much concealer to soften the evidence of a long week. Her name tag said Dina. She asked how she could help, and I found my voice steady, almost rehearsed. "I need transaction histories," I said softly. "From the last 7 years. All transfers to the Prescott Avenue mortgage account, and any payments I made toward property expenses." She blinked, surprised. 7 years? I nodded. "It'll help settle a housing matter." Her expression shifted just slightly. Not pity, but a kind of understanding reserved for women who have learned to read hints between the lines. "We can print everything," she said gently. "It might take a few minutes." I sat in the waiting chairs, listening to the printer whir and clatter in the back. Each sheet felt like a small justice being born. Names, dates, amounts, all those truths laid out in black and white. I thought of Carla again, and that thick notary stamp. Funny how the smallest details come back to save you when the biggest people fail you. Have you ever held so many facts in your hands that they steadied your heart more than any apology ever could? Dina returned with a stack nearly half an inch thick. She had clipped it neatly, bless her, and slid it toward me with both hands. "Is everything here?" I skimmed the first few pages. There it was. Monthly transfers, notations, my initials in bank memos when I had to authorize adjustments. Clean, clear, undeniable. "Yes," I said, "this is everything." From the bank, I walked to the copy shop on Maple Street. The bell above the door jingled the moment I stepped inside, a sweet, old-fashioned sound. The place smelled of toner and warm paper, and the owner, a man named Harold, who'd been making copies since before I was born, nodded at me like I was a regular. "Afternoon, Mrs. Donnelly. Need the usual?" "Just some copies," I said. "Quite a few, actually." I laid out the documents on the counter. Bank statements, receipts, the notarized agreement, utilities I'd paid, even screenshots of emails where Elaine thanked me for handling the payment again this month. Harold didn't ask questions. He just fed each page into the copier like he'd done it 1,000 times. The machine hummed steadily, spitting out proof after proof. Outside, people hurried by with early holiday shopping bags. Inside, I watched each duplicated page slide onto the tray, and I felt something uncoil, slowly inside me. It was like watching the pieces of my own story finally remember themselves. Before leaving, I organized the copies into labeled envelopes, something Walter taught me while we were sorting our taxes decades ago. "If you ever need to defend yourself," he'd said, "make the truth impossible to misplace." I miss that man every day. But in moments like that, I feel him standing just behind me, nodding. As I stepped back onto the street, my phone buzzed. Elaine's name flashed on the screen. For a second, I just stared at it. I knew what she wanted, an update, a guilty reassurance, maybe even permission to pretend the morning never happened. I let it ring. Back at the bus stop, I took a seat, the folder secured tightly in my lap. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in soft oranges and pale pinks. I could hear distant traffic, a dog barking, someone laughing across the street. Life kept moving, even on the days you realized your heart had been mishandled. When I got back to the house, Mark's truck was gone. Elaine sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through emails. She looked up with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mom, I didn't mean earlier, like, harshly," she murmured. "We just need to think about the future." I set my bag down carefully on the counter, my voice calm. "So do I." Her brows pinched, just a flicker of worry. I could feel the power shift, not loudly, but quietly, the way a tide changes when no one is looking. I went to my room without another word. I placed the lavender folder on my bed and exhaled slowly. I wasn't ready to show them anything yet, not until every detail was in place and every next step was clear. That evening, I brewed chamomile tea and sat by my small window, watching shadows stretch across the lawn. Inside that room, with the folder beside me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not fear, not anger, control. And I promised myself, with Walter as my silent witness, that I would handle what came next not with rage, but with precision. The next morning, the house felt unnaturally quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't soothe. It listens. I woke before everyone else, brewed my coffee, and sat at the kitchen table where the sunrise spilled across the wood in soft stripes. My hands wrapped around the warm mug, but my thoughts were somewhere far deeper. I kept thinking about all the years I'd believed being quiet made me virtuous. That patience was the same thing as kindness. That love was measured by how much you endured, not whether you were respected. Funny how life waits until you're nearly 70 to show you the difference. The lavender folder sat on the counter beside me, slightly open, revealing the corner of the notarized agreement. I traced the edge of the paper with one fingertip. Evidence, proof, a reminder that I hadn't imagined the promises they made. Around 8, I heard Elaine come down the stairs. Her footsteps hesitated halfway, like she wasn't sure how to greet me. She poured herself coffee without meeting my eyes, stirring it too fast. "Mom, about yesterday," she began. I didn't interrupt. She took it as invitation. "I didn't mean for it to sound like an ultimatum. We're just stressed. Financially, emotionally. You know how Mark is under pressure." I took a slow sip of coffee. "I know exactly how Mark is." Her face tightened, though I had said it softly. She rushed on anyway, like she needed to outrun her own discomfort. "And we were thinking, maybe you could talk to the county office about senior housing. They might have openings. Or you could move in with Aunt Sophie for a bit." Aunt Sophie, who lives 3 states away, who has a studio apartment and chronic migraines. The suggestion was an insult disguised as concern. I didn't raise my voice. "Elaine, why would I move anywhere when we have an agreement?" There it was, the flinch, a small one, but unmistakable. "Mom, that paper was just so the bank wouldn't question the refinance," she muttered. "You know that." "No," I said softly. "You know that's not true." She opened her mouth to argue, but I stood before she could speak. I walked upstairs, leaving her alone with her coffee and the echo of her own guilt. In my room, I locked the door and sat at my desk. I pulled out my notebook and wrote down everything that had happened over the last 48 hours. Dates, words, what they said, what they didn't say. I learned long ago that people rewrite history when their comfort depends on it. But paper doesn't lie. Later that afternoon, I called Mr. Green's office. His receptionist, a sharp-voiced woman named Marianne, answered. "Mrs. Donnelly?" she greeted warmly when I introduced myself. Mr. Green is available at 2:30 tomorrow if you'd like to come in. He asked if you could bring any documentation you think might be relevant. I glanced at the lavender folder. Oh, I have documentation. When I ended the call, I felt something settle inside me, a quiet readiness. That evening at dinner, I watched Elaine and Mark whisper to each other, pausing when I entered the room. They had leftover takeout spread across the table. The containers half empty, written receipts crumpled beside them, evidence of their spending habits they pretended were necessary. As I sat down, Mark cleared his throat. "So," he said too cheerfully, "Elaine tells me you're thinking about some new arrangements." I smiled faintly. "I'm thinking about the future, yes." He chuckled, a brittle sound. "Good, good. It'll be better for everyone." "Especially you," I said gently. He blinked, his fork paused mid-air. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked, wary. I didn't answer. I just lifted another bite of food and let the silence do what silence does best: make truth impossible to ignore. Have you ever watched someone realize you're no longer a piece on their board, but a player in your own right? After dinner, I returned to my room and gathered the documents again. I sorted them into groups: agreements, payments, utilities, correspondence. I didn't rush. I didn't pace. I didn't cry. It was almost meditative, watching the story of my sacrifices unfold in paper form. When I finished, I turned off my lamp and lay back on my bed, hands folded across my chest like I was holding my own heart steady. Tomorrow, I would walk into Mr. Green's office with the truth. Not embellished, not dramatized, just presented. And the truth, when laid out clearly, becomes a kind of shield. Outside my window, the streetlights flickered on one by one. Somewhere in the house, Lily laughed softly at something on her tablet, a bright, innocent sound that reminded me of the love that still lived under this roof, even if not from her parents. I closed my eyes. I wasn't afraid of what came next. I was simply awake. The next day arrived gray and misty, the kind of morning that feels suspended between worlds. I left the house quietly, not wanting to answer questions, not wanting to pretend. The lavender folder lay inside my tote bag, its weight steady against my hip as I walked down the driveway. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't have to. I'd memorized every brick, every window, every inch of a place I'd helped save more times than its owners cared to remember. The bus ride into town felt strangely peaceful. I watched raindrops race down the window, merging into crooked silver lines. My reflection appeared between them, older now, softer around the edges, but clearer somehow. There's a certain strength you reclaim when you stop apologizing for taking up space. When I reached Mr. Green's office, I took a moment outside the door to gather myself. His building smelled like old carpet and ink, and the elevator hummed as it carried me to the third floor. A small brass sign beside the door read, "Green and Walsh, Attorneys at Law." The letters polished enough to reflect the hallway light. Marianne greeted me with that crisp efficiency of someone who knows exactly how to run a ship. Her glasses sat low on her nose, and her voice softened just a touch when she saw me. "Mrs. Donnelly, he's ready for you." Mr. Green stood as I entered. He was older than the last time I saw him, thinner hair, deeper lines around the eyes, but still the same steady presence I remembered from when Walter and I made our wills. He gestured toward the leather chair across from his desk. "It's good to see you," he said, "though I suspect you're not here for pleasant reasons." I sat down, placed the bag on the floor beside me, and folded my hands in my lap. "No," I murmured, "but I'm here for necessary ones." He nodded once, respectfully. "Tell me everything." And so I did. Not rushed, not emotional, just the truth laid out like the papers in my folder. I told him about the refinance, the agreement, the monthly transfers. I told him about paying utilities, repairs, property taxes when they fell short. And then, quieter, I told him about the conversation, how Elaine and Mark had said I wasn't welcome anymore. For a long moment, he didn't speak. He just studied me with the kind of attention that feels like a form of protection. "Did they say those exact words?" he finally asked. "Yes," I answered softly. "More than once." "And you still have the notarized addendum?" I reached into my tote bag and placed the folder gently on his desk, opening it so the first page faced him. He adjusted his glasses and read, his expression turning heavier as he moved from one document to the next. When he finished, he exhaled through his nose, slow and deliberate. "Mrs. Donnelly," he said, "this is not only valid, it's incredibly strong documentation. They signed this willingly. The bank notarized it. You, Al, have a contractual right to reside in that home for as long as you choose. They cannot evict you, informally or otherwise." I nodded, though hearing it aloud still sent a tremor through my chest. He continued, "If they push the issue, I can file an injunction. But from a legal standpoint, you are on extremely solid ground." He paused, then added with a faint, almost paternal sternness, "They seem to have forgotten what they agreed to." My throat tightened, not from sadness, but from a bittersweet validation I hadn't realized I needed. "Mr. Green," I said, "I don't want to fight with them. I just want them to understand I won't be discarded." He leaned back slightly. "Then I recommend a formal letter. Calm, factual, legally precise. It will remind them of their obligations without escalating matters unnecessarily." A letter. Simple, but powerful. Non-violent. Non-vengeful. Just truth, given structure. He drafted it while I waited. The tapping of his keys was steady, rhythmic, almost soothing. When he finished, he printed a copy and slid it across the desk. I read the first paragraph, my heart thrumming quietly. It began with my full name, the date, and a direct reference to the notarized agreement. It stated that any attempt to remove me from the home would constitute a breach of contract and could result in legal action. It outlined my contributions, documented, verified, and reaffirmed my right to remain. Not dramatic, just undeniable. "Would you like me to send it directly?" he asked. I thought for a moment, then shook my head. "No, I'll take it home myself." His brows lifted slightly, as if he didn't expect that answer. But he nodded. "Then bring it to them when you're ready, and if anything escalates, call me immediately." I thanked him, shook his hand, and left the office feeling a strange mixture of heaviness and relief. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the sky had opened just enough to let a pale band of sunlight stretch across the pavement. On the bus ride back, I held the letter in my lap, the envelope still warm from the printer. The people around me chatted quietly, unaware that my entire life was shifting in that simple piece of paper. Have you ever held something so small that carried the entire weight of your dignity? When I stepped back into the house, the floor creaked beneath my shoes. Elaine peeked from the living room, eyes questioning. "Mom, where were you?" I looked at her calmly. "I had an appointment." Her gaze flicked to the envelope in my hand, and something in her expression tightened. Fear or guilt or both. I didn't hand it to her yet. Not tonight. Tonight, I would sit with myself, with clarity. Tonight, I would rest. Because tomorrow they would learn that the woman they thought they could push aside still knew exactly how to stand tall. I didn't sleep much that night, though not from fear. It was more like my mind wouldn't stop turning the truth over in its hands, examining each side, fitting it into place. The house creaked and settled around me, as if it too sensed that a shift was coming. The letter from Mr. Green lay on my nightstand, its envelope catching the faint glow from the street lamp outside. Before dawn, I slipped out of bed, put on my robe, and made my way to the kitchen. The tile floor felt cool under my feet. I started the coffee maker, listening to the familiar drip and hiss. Funny how the smallest sounds become anchors in moments of uncertainty. As I sat there, my hands wrapped around a mug of dark roast, I thought about Lily, about how children rarely understand the storms surrounding them, even when they're standing in the rain. I wasn't angry at her parents anymore. Not exactly. It was something deeper, something steadier. A disappointment worn so thin and sharp, it cut cleanly. When the clock struck 7, I heard footsteps upstairs. Elaine first, then Lily's lighter ones. Mark's heavy tread followed a few minutes later. He came down scratching his jaw, muttering about misplacing his sunglasses. I watched him open and slam cabinets like the world owed him something. "Morning," I said softly. He grunted in return. Elaine joined us, tying her hair back, her eyes moving between my face and the envelope on the table. "What's that?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "A letter," I said, sipping my coffee. "From who?" "From my attorney." Mark froze. Slowly, his head lifted. "Your attorney?" "My attorney," I repeated, calm and measured. "The one Walter and I used for decades. He's very thorough." Elaine swallowed. "Mom, why would you need—" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't let emotion twist my words. "Because yesterday, you suggested I leave my home, and you implied our signed agreement was meaningless. This letter clarifies that it is not." I slid the envelope across the table, not dramatically, just firmly. It made the softest whispering sound against the wood. Elaine hesitated, then picked it up with shaking fingers. She broke the seal and opened it. Her eyes moved rapidly across the page. Mark leaned over her shoulder, reading silently. I watched the realization bloom in their faces. Slow, dawning, bitter. That expression people make when the universe reminds them that actions have consequences, even when the person they wronged uttered barely a whisper. The kitchen was silent except for the ticking of the wall clock. Finally, Mark spoke. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. This wasn't supposed to be—" "A legal agreement?" I finished softly. "It is. You signed it. The bank notarized it. You both acknowledged my right to remain in this home indefinitely. You asked for my financial support, and I gave it. Faithfully. For years." Elaine's voice trembled. "Mom, we didn't mean to make you feel unwelcome. Things have just been hard. We weren't thinking." "No," I said gently. "You were thinking very clearly about your own comfort, but not about mine." Mark raked a hand through his hair. "What do you want, then? Money? An apology? You want us to beg?" I shook my head. "I want respect, and I want boundaries, not as your mother, as a person." He scoffed, but Elaine nudged him harshly, eyes wide with warning. She looked at me, voice softening. "What happens now?" "Now," I said. "We understand each other. I'm not leaving. I'm not being pushed out. And from this day forward, everything regarding this house will be handled properly. Shared chores, shared responsibilities, shared financial clarity. No secrecy, no decisions made behind my back." Mark opened his mouth to argue, but I continued, steady as a river wearing down stone. "And if either of you attempts to pressure me again, Mr. Green is prepared to take further action. Legal action. But I hope it doesn't come to that." Elaine stared at me for a long moment. I could see the wheels turning, the pride unraveling, the realization settling like dust in sunlight. "Mom," she whispered, "why didn't you say something sooner?" I smiled, tired, but true. "Because I believed love was enough. but now I understand that love without respect becomes something else entirely. Have you ever spoken a truth so long buried that your own voice surprised you? The conversation ended not with shouting, but with a kind of shaky truce. Elaine folded the letter carefully and set it back on the table. Mark stormed out to the porch, muttering curses under his breath, but he didn't slam the door as hard as he wanted to. Lily came downstairs a few minutes later, hair still messy from sleep. She saw my face before she saw anyone else's, and she ran to hug me, arms tight around my waist. "Grandma," she said, "are you okay?" I kissed the top of her head. "I'm just fine, sweetheart." And for the first time in a long while, I meant it. Later, after breakfast dishes were washed and put away, I returned to my room and closed the door. I placed the lavender folder gently on my dresser. My hands rested flat on its surface, steady and warm. For years I had carried that folder like proof of my worth. But now, I realized something even more important. It was never the papers that protected me. It was the moment I finally believed I deserved protection. And in that small, quiet room, with morning light sliding across the floor, I felt something bloom inside me. Not victory, not revenge, just dignity rising like the sun. The days that followed felt strangely still, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Elaine moved a little softer, spoke a little quieter. Mark kept his distance, grumbling under it all but noticeably cautious, like someone tiptoeing around a sleeping dog they'd accidentally kicked. I didn't celebrate their discomfort. Truly, I didn't. I just observed it, the way one notices a shift in the weather. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells. They were. One afternoon, as I folded laundry in my room, I thought about Walter. He used to say, "Mary, peace isn't the absence of noise, it's the presence of boundaries." I wish I'd understood that sooner. I wish someone had taught girls of my generation that being loving didn't mean being invisible. Have you ever realized you trained people to treat you smaller than you are? The day after receiving the letter, Elaine knocked gently on my door. "Mom," she said softly, "can we talk?" I set down the towel I was folding and opened the door. She stood there looking tired, like someone who'd been forced to see a reflection she wasn't proud of. "Come in," I said. She sat at the foot of my bed, hands wringing together. It was the same way she used to sit when she was 10 and wanted to confess breaking something in the kitchen. Seeing her like that tugged at a soft place in me. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For everything. For making you feel like you didn't matter. I don't know what got into us, into me." I sat beside her. "Stress doesn't excuse cruelty, Elaine." She nodded, tears gathering. "I know. And I let Mark say things he shouldn't have. I let myself believe you'd be okay no matter what we said. That you'd just adjust." There it was, the truth. "Because I always have," I murmured. She looked at me sharply, guilty. "Yes." I didn't cry. Maybe I had run out of tears for them. She took a deep breath. "Mom, I want to fix things, but I don't know where to start." I reached for her hand, not out of obligation, but because forgiveness is a choice you make for your own heart first. We start by being honest and responsible, together. She nodded again slowly. "Okay, then maybe we should go over the house expenses, all of us, and make a plan." "Not a plan for me," I said gently. "A plan with me, Thai." She swallowed hard. "Yes, with you." That small correction felt like a crack of light slipping through a long-shut door. Later that evening, we all sat around the dining table, Mark included, though he looked as though he'd rather be anywhere else. Elaine spread out the bills: water, electric, insurance, loan statements. For once, no one pushed them toward me like chores I was supposed to absorb. "We should divide these fairly," Elaine said, clearing her throat. Mark sighed. "I don't see why." I didn't look at him. "Because," I replied calmly, "fairness is what healthy homes are built on." He didn't speak again. We reviewed each bill. I showed them the property tax receipts I'd covered for 3 years straight. Elaine's eyes widened. Mark's face paled. They saw the things they'd ignored, the quiet emergencies I'd solved while they posted pictures of dinners out and lake trips. To his credit, Mark eventually rubbed his forehead and muttered, "All right, you're right. We've been irresponsible." It wasn't an apology, but it was more humility than I had seen in him in years. That was enough for now. Over the next few days, I noticed small changes. Elaine made dinner twice without me prompting. Mark started loading his own laundry. And Lily, sweet Lily, kept slipping drawings under my door, each one with a little heart drawn in the corner. One night, she climbed into bed beside me while I was reading. "Mom and Dad are acting different," she said, whispering even though no one was nearby. "How so?" I asked. "They're nicer." She thought for a moment. "Are you magic?" I laughed softly. "No, sweetheart. I just finally remembered I mattered." She nodded like she understood more than she should. Children see truth with fewer obstacles. In the quiet moments, I felt something else changing too, inside me. A kind of space opening up that had been crushed flat for years. I found myself walking outside more, breathing slower, smiling at little things. One morning, I bought myself a cinnamon bun from the bakery on Main Street, something I hadn't done in ages because it felt too indulgent. Funny how reclaiming dignity also makes room for small joys. One afternoon, near the end of the week, I found Elaine at the dining table with her laptop open, spreadsheets spread out, a budgeting app blinking on the screen. She looked up when I approached. "I'm trying," she said quietly. I touched her shoulder. "Trying is how everything begins." She looked like she might cry, but she didn't. Instead, she whispered, "I'm glad you're still here." I gave her a soft smile. "I'm glad I'm still myself." That night, as I lay in bed with the window cracked open to let the cool evening breeze in, I realized something. This wasn't about winning. This wasn't about punishing them. This was about me finally stepping into my own life again. Fully, unapologetically, calmly. And the calmest people, I've learned, are often the ones who have survived storms they never deserved. I closed my eyes, breathing in that quiet, steady peace. For the first time in a long while, the house didn't feel like a place I was clinging to. It felt like a place I was choosing. The following weeks moved gently, like a river smoothing stones. Not quickly, not loudly, just steadily. I found myself breathing easier, noticing things I'd long ignored. The way morning light spilled like honey across the living room rug. The soft rustle of the maple tree outside my window. The little creak in the hallway that always sounded like a whispered hello. It's funny how a shift inside your heart changes the way the world sounds. And the house did sound different. Quieter, yes, but in a peaceful way rather than a tense one. I didn't hear Elaine whispering to Mark in corners. I didn't hear doors closing pointedly. Instead, I heard dishes being washed without being asked, laundry tumbling before it grew into mountains, even Mark humming under his breath while fixing a loose cabinet door that had annoyed me for months. It wasn't perfect. Of course not. But it was changing. One morning, as I clipped coupons at the kitchen table, an old habit I never quite let go, I smelled something unfamiliar. Toast burning, slightly. Elaine rushed in with a panicked look. I was making breakfast," she said. "For you." I blinked, surprised. "For me?" "Yes." She set down a plate of scrambled eggs, slightly overcooked but warm. "I thought, Maybe we could start doing things differently, more balanced. I studied her face. She looked tired but softer, like someone who'd finally stopped pretending she didn't know better. "Thank you," I said, meaning it. We ate together quietly before Lily padded in, still in pajamas, hair sticking up. She curled into my side, as she always had. Some things didn't need repairing. They were never broken. Later that week, Elaine called the utility companies to straighten out overdue notices that had been ignored too long. I listened from my room as she worked through call menus, her voice firm but patient. It reminded me of the woman she used to be, before the stress, before the exhaustion, before the careless habits hardened into entitlement. Mark surprised me too, though he tried to hide it under gruffness. One Saturday afternoon, he came home carrying a folded stack of legal-size envelopes. "Property tax info," he said, setting them on the table. "Figured we should all look at it." "We, not you." He hovered awkwardly, then added, "And, the gutter needs cleaning. I'll take care of it tomorrow." I nodded. "That's thoughtful." He shrugged, embarrassed. "Just doing my part." But small acknowledgments, I've learned, are often the seeds of real change. One afternoon, I took a walk around the block. The air was cool and sharp, the kind that smells faintly of distant fireplaces. Leaves crunched under my shoes, and for a moment, I felt like the world was turning just for me. I paused at the small park on Elm Street, the one where I used to bring Lily when she was a toddler. A young mother pushed a stroller along the path, humming softly. I watched her and wondered where the years had gone. Have you ever realized you've lived so long for others that you almost forgot the sound of yourself? On my way back home, I passed the community center. A small sign on the door caught my eye. Senior Art and Storytelling Group, Thursdays at 10. I stood there for a long moment, the wind tugging gently at my coat sleeve. Walter used to tell me I had a storyteller's heart. Maybe he'd be proud to see me notice something meant just for me. When Thursday arrived, I surprised even myself by going. The room was small, lined with tables covered in art supplies, colored pencils, charcoal, stacks of empty sketch pads. A few older women sat in a loose circle, chatting about grocery store prices and grandkids. The moment I stepped inside, a woman with bright silver hair smiled at me as though we'd known each other for years. "You must be new," she said. "I'm June." She had the kind of smile that lights up a room without trying. I felt something loosen in my chest. "I'm Mary." "Well, come sit, Mary. We're talking about turning our memories into stories. You look like someone who's lived a few." I laughed, a genuine sound, light and unguarded. "I suppose I have." As the session began, I felt myself open in ways I hadn't expected. The women shared stories about childhood summers, husbands long gone, small victories that still glowed decades later. I offered a story, too, about the cinnamon buns at the old bakery Walter used to love, and how he'd bring home extra napkins because he knew I hated sticky fingers. The group nodded, smiled, listened. No judgment, no demands, just presence. It felt like stepping into warm water after standing barefoot in winter. When I returned home that afternoon, I found Elaine in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup. She looked up, surprised to see me smiling in a way she probably hadn't seen in years. "You look happy," she said. "I am," I replied simply. And I realized it was true. Not a fleeting happiness, but a steady kind. The kind that grows when you reclaim your place in the world, not as someone's helper, not as a background character, but as a whole person. Later that evening, while I sat on the porch watching the sky turn lavender, Mark stepped outside. He cleared his throat in that awkward way he had. "Mary," he said, I wanted to say we're trying. I know it's late, but we are. I nodded gently. Late is still better than never. He looked relieved, then slipped back inside. Alone on the porch, I listened to the soft hum of distant traffic and the rustling of the trees. A warm peace settled over me, not because everything was fixed, but because I finally understood that I didn't have to lose myself for others to find themselves. For the first time in many years, I felt the beginning of something beautiful, a life that was mine again. The following month unfolded like a gentle exhale, slow, steady, filled with the small rhythms that make a life feel livable again. I woke up each morning with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. Not triumph, not smugness, just a quiet certainty that I had finally stepped back into myself. I began spending more time outside the house, not because I needed to escape, but because I finally remembered I was allowed to exist beyond its walls. I went to the community storytelling group every Thursday, where June and I grew closer with each passing week. She had a warm laugh, the kind that started in her chest and rolled outward like sunlight spilling across a kitchen floor. We'd sit together after each session, sipping weak coffee from paper cups, talking about everything from recipes to grief to the strange ways life circles back on itself. One day she asked, "Mary, when was the last time you did something just because it made you happy?" The question hit harder than I expected. I stared at the steam rising from my coffee and whispered, "Longer ago than I care to admit." When I got home that afternoon, Lily greeted me with a hug that nearly knocked my purse off my shoulder. She held up a school paper, a story she'd written for class. "It's about you," she said proudly. "I wrote that you're the bravest person I know." My breath caught. I felt that small, warm ache behind my ribs that only children can kindle. "Did you?" I asked softly. She nodded. "Because you stay calm, even when people are unfair, and you help everyone, and you don't yell, you just fix things, like magic." I kissed her forehead, feeling tears press against my eyes. "Oh, sweetheart, being brave doesn't always look like yelling. Sometimes it looks like standing still and saying, 'No more.'" Her eyes widened, like she was storing the words somewhere deep. Inside the house, Elaine had started showing up differently, in ways I didn't expect. She'd ask if I wanted to join her for a walk. She'd bring me a cup of tea in the evenings without prompting. Once, she even apologized again, unprompted, saying she'd been ashamed of how she let stress twist her into someone she didn't recognize. We sat together at the dining table that night, both of us tracing the wood grain with our fingertips. "Mom," she said quietly, "I've been thinking a lot. About boundaries, about the way I treated you, about how much you did for us without asking for anything." I didn't interrupt. She needed to speak. "I got comfortable with the idea that you would always be there to hold everything together. I let myself believe you didn't need anything in return because you never asked." She looked up, eyes shiny. "But you shouldn't have had to ask." For the first time in a long time, Elaine was speaking to me not as a daughter expecting comfort, but as a woman offering accountability. "I forgive you," I said gently, "but forgiveness doesn't erase the need for change." "I know," she whispered, "and I'm changing." And she was, slowly, honestly. Not perfectly, but no one changes perfectly. Even Mark softened. He still grumbled over small things, still muttered under his breath when football games didn't go his way. But there was a shift. One Saturday, I found him painting the loose railing on the porch. "You don't need to do that," I said. He shrugged. "Yeah, well, it needed doing, and you've done enough." It wasn't a grand speech, but sincerity rarely comes wrapped in grand speeches. Sometimes it comes in a man with a paintbrush and a guilty conscience. Have you ever watched someone grow in small, hesitant steps, the way plants inch towards sunlight after being kept too long in shade? That was what my days became, quiet steps towards something healthier. I started cooking again, but not because I felt obligated. I cooked when I wanted to. In return, sometimes Elaine cooked and sometimes Mark ordered takeout so no one had to cook at all. It felt balanced, finally. And in the spaces between their shifting behaviors, I made room for new pieces of myself. I started taking short trips to the old library downtown. I bought a potted rosemary plant for my windowsill. I even joined a weekend watercolor class at the community center, where my paintings looked more like confused clouds than landscapes. But I loved every minute of it. One late afternoon, as I watered my rosemary plant, I realized something. The house didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It didn't feel like a borrowed place or a burden or a debt I had to keep paying. It felt like a home again because I had claimed my place in it. Later that evening, Elaine knocked on my door. "Mom," she said softly, "I was thinking, maybe you'd like to help me with the Thanksgiving menu this year?" I smiled. "I'd like that." "Good," she said, relaxing. "Because Lily wants to make your sweet potato casserole, and she says it only tastes right when you're in the kitchen." Her words wrapped around me like a warm shawl. After she left, I sat on my bed and looked around my room, the soft lamp glow, the framed photo of Walter smiling gently, the folded blankets I'd collected over the years, the lavender folder now tucked safely away in my dresser, rather than sitting out like a shield. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't on guard. I wasn't preparing for the next blow. I was simply living again. And living, I realized, is the quietest and strongest form of retribution there is. A life reclaimed, a heart restored. As the night settled softly around the house, I felt peace rise in me again, deeper this time, steadier. The story wasn't finished. But for the first time, the next chapter felt like it belonged entirely to me. The morning of Thanksgiving arrived with a soft gray light, the kind that makes everything feel slower, gentler, almost suspended in time. I woke before anyone else, as I often did, and stood for a moment at my bedroom window. The lawn was covered in thin frost, glittering like crushed sugar. For years, this house had felt like a burden I carried alone, but that morning, it felt like a place I was choosing to stand in, on my terms. Downstairs, the kitchen was quiet. I tied my apron, pulled my hair into its usual low bun, and began peeling sweet potatoes. The steady scrape of the peeler, the warm smell of cinnamon and butter rising in the air, it all took me back to when Walter and I used to host Thanksgiving in our little Cape Cod house. He'd sneak bites of the marshmallows when he thought I wasn't looking. I smiled at the memory, feeling that familiar ache of missing him, but softer now, gentler. As the sweet potatoes baked, I felt a shift behind me. Light footsteps on the stairs. "Grandma?" Lily's voice floated in, sleepy and warm. "Can I help?" I nodded, and she climbed onto the little step stool beside me. Together we mixed the topping, her small hands carefully sprinkling brown sugar across the dish. "Mom said this is your recipe," she murmured. "She said it's kind of famous." "Well," I said, stirring, "it's only famous because people you love enjoy it." A quiet truth, but one that felt like a life lesson in itself. After a while, Elaine joined us, hair still tousled from sleep. She paused in the doorway, watching us with a soft, almost unsure smile. "Morning," she said. "Morning," I answered. She stepped closer, touching my shoulder lightly, hesitantly. "Thank you for doing this, for being here." I nodded. "I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." Later, Mark came downstairs carrying folding chairs from the garage. When he passed through the kitchen, he cleared his throat. "The railing outside looks good, doesn't it?" he muttered. "It does," I said gently. "Thank you for fixing it." He nodded, relieved. Small steps, but steps all the same. By noon, the house filled with cousins, laughter, the clatter of dishes, the sound of old family stories resurfacing. People moved in and out of the kitchen, offering help, passing plates, sneaking tastes. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the invisible facilitator of everything. I felt included, present, wanted. At one point, I stood quietly in the doorway watching everyone gather around the table. Elaine arranging napkins, Mark carving the turkey, Lily weaving between legs with a stack of spoons. A warmth spread through me, something deeper than pride, gentler than triumph. Have you ever realized, all at once, that you survived something without losing yourself? Dinner was noisy, joyful, imperfect, just the way a family table should be. People talked over one another, argued good-naturedly about football, passed dishes in circles. When Lily announced she made the casserole with Grandma's supervision, everyone cheered, and I felt my chest tighten with something like gratitude. Not for being praised, but for finally being seen. After the guests left and the house quieted, I found myself on the back porch with a cup of tea. The night air was crisp, smelling faintly of pine and distant wood smoke. I pulled Walter's old sweater tighter around me and exhaled, long and slow. The porch light cast a warm circle around me. Beyond it, the yard faded into gentle darkness. A month ago, this same darkness felt heavy. Tonight, it felt peaceful. I thought about the path that brought me here, how years of silence had almost erased me, how the moment of betrayal had forced me awake, how the lavender folder had become both a burden and a blessing. How the truth, when spoken calmly, can turn the tide of an entire household. I had not screamed, I had not threatened, I had not used anger as my weapon. I used my worth, my records, my rights, my voice, and somehow, in defending myself, I had given the others permission to change too. Footsteps creaked behind me, and Elaine slipped onto the porch. She wrapped her arms around herself, leaned against the railing, and looked up at the night sky. "I know I've said it before," she whispered, "but I'm really, truly sorry, Mom." I placed a hand over hers. "I know, and you've shown it." She nodded slowly, her eyes glassy. "I want us to move forward, a better way." "We already are," I said softly. We stood there in silence, breathing the same cold night air. For the first time in years, it felt like we were not mother and daughter carrying unspoken wounds, but two women, both repairing, both learning. Eventually, she went inside, leaving me alone with the stars. I closed my eyes, letting gratitude settle over me like a blanket. Sometimes, retribution isn't about getting even. Sometimes, it's about reclaiming your place, your dignity, your peace. And in that reclamation, others discover the space to grow too. As I finished my tea, I whispered a quiet thank you to Walter, to myself, to the courage I didn't know I still possessed, and to you for listening to my story. If my journey taught me anything, it's this. No one can take your place in the world once you decide to stand in it fully. Thank you for being here with me. If you enjoyed sharing this path, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment, and tell me, if you were in my place, what would you have done?